cartoon Masha and the Bear is an animated series released in 2009 in Russia. Inspired by a popular folk tale in the country with the same name, transmitted through generations. The animated series has been translated into 25 languages and aired in over 100 countries. The story narrates the life of a girl named Masha and her friend Bear, who protects her from dangers. Masha lived with her grandparents and one day decided to join her friends to gather mushrooms and fruits in the forest. Distracted and singing, she wandered away from her friends and got lost. Desperate, she sought help but found nobody, only an empty cabin. Unaware that the cabin was the home of a fierce bear, who was out for a stroll in the forest at that moment, Masha thought of turning it into a shelter until she could get help. However, her peace was short-lived, as that night the bear returned and tried to attack her. Masha, being small and agile, managed to dodge the bear's attacks, and after a difficult struggle, she escaped. Realizing that the bear was getting tired, she came up with a brilliant idea to calm him down. She claimed she knew how to make fruit pies and could make them for him every day. With this trick, Masha ensured her survival and convinced the bear not to harm her. However, the favor came with a price, as the bear kept her as a prisoner, forbidding her from returning home or wandering in the forest. He threatened to devour her if she tried to escape. Masha, seeking an opportunity to escape, had another brilliant idea. After a day when the bear returned from his walks in the forest, she asked for permission to spend a day in her village and take pies to her grandparents. The bear was reluctant, fearing she might run away or get lost in the forest. Still, he agreed to help and offered to carry the pie basket himself instead of Masha. Little did the bear know that it was all part of Masha's plan. She baked a batch of pies and took a large basket, warning the bear not to open the basket or eat the pies. When the bear went to check the weather before their journey, Masha took the opportunity to hide inside the basket. During the journey, when the bear stopped to rest, he considered eating a couple of pies. However, Masha shouted, pretending to be far away and seeing everything he did. Startled, the bear thought he was hearing things, or that Masha might be watching him from a very tall tree. He got scared, and at that moment the bear quickened his pace. Upon reaching the village, the bear searched for Masha's grandparents' house. When he found it, he knocked on the door with all his might to get their attention. The dogs in the village sniffed the bear and barked at him from all the yards. Terrified, the bear dropped the basket near the gate and ran as fast as he could without looking back. Amidst the commotion, Masha's grandparents arrived at the gate and saw the basket. The grandfather lifted the lid and couldn't believe his eyes. To his delight, Masha was inside, safe and sound. Masha and her grandparents embraced each other intensely, celebrating their long-awaited reunion warmly. This is the original story, which is much darker than the animated series, as it deals with themes of slavery and violence, far from the version that portrays a beautiful friendship between the girl and the bear. However, there is another story, this time real and much more sinister, which inspired the Russian folktale. It happened over 200 years ago, around 1820 in the old Russia. Masha was an innocent little girl who lived in a small village in the interior of the former Russian Empire. At that time, of course, there were no means of communication like we have today, only printed newspapers. So for amusement, people used to gather to tell stories. During those times, little Masha heard many tales that adults told about life in the big cities, and mainly about the novelties brought by the circus. Bears were, for a long time, one of the main attractions in circuses. Back then, there wasn't such a concrete debate around the terrible conditions to which animals were subjected in arenas. Therefore, the presence of bears, lions, tigers, and other animals was intensely exploited. Masha heard stories about the feats that bears performed in the circus rings, and she became interested in seeing it all up close. One day, a circus arrived in the small town where the girl lived with her family, and this dream became something tangible. Masha's eyes lit up when she heard the news, and there was no way around it. The little girl insisted so much that her parents had no choice but to authorize the trip and accompany her to the circus. At one point, Masha took advantage of her parents being distracted watching the shows and went in search of the bears. She wanted to see them up close, touch them, and maybe even ride a bicycle with them. After all, they seemed so cute. And so, Masha walked with her eyes glued to everything happening around her, making sure she had successfully slipped away from her parents until she stood face to face with the bear's cage. At that moment, she felt a pang of frustration since the animals were, of course, locked up for safety reasons. But Masha was a very clever girl, and she wasn't going to leave that circus without achieving her main goal, playing with the bears. She noticed that the cage key was on a table and wasted no time in freeing the bears. She grabbed the keys, opened the door, and entered the cage. At that moment, the bear attacked the little girl and began to devour her fiercely while she screamed incessantly, in a way that the people at the circus could hear her agony. Immediately, the circus staff rushed in, armed, searching for the girl. They tried to act quickly to prevent the worst, but when they arrived at the scene, Masha was already dead. She had been torn apart by the animals. The bears became uncontrollable, and the circus workers tried to contain them in various ways, but nothing they did had any effect. They had to kill all the bears. What a sad story, right? Indeed, indirectly, this tragedy, which really happened in Russia, inspired the creation of the folk tale and later the emergence of the animated series, which finally had a true happy ending. Although the story of Masha and the bear is a fictional narrative based on a story that happened a long time ago, in our days we can still find sad cases involving children. I invite you to watch this video that tells the story of a 2-year-old child who was imprisoned in North Korea and sentenced to life imprisonment. That's it, guys, and see you in the next video.